Hey teachers, I'm talking to you today, and today I'm going to share with you a fun and creative writing lesson that my students in my classes, teenage classes generally, almost always enjoy. And if you do it with adults, they might enjoy it. I'm not sure. But stick around. Let's go. Hey guys, I'm Jesse from Sweet Academy, and I've traditionally dedicated this channel to helping learners learn English by teaching expressions, phrases, grammar, things like that. But I'm transitioning to give lesson ideas, tips, and advice from my experience in the classroom. So if that interests you, then click that subscribe button and the bell so you can get videos and ideas every week. Or stick around and see if you like this one to decide at the end. Let's get into this lesson. I have a fun writing lesson that some of you probably have already done in certain ways, but I want to give you some tips and some of my experience to help you make it a little more solid and concrete rather than just throwing a random idea out there. So let's take a look at this. And the idea is we're going to be writing a chain story. Well, your students are going to be writing a chain story. And you may call it something else. You may have different names for it. But it's essentially where each student writes a different part of the story, right? And they build a story. So I typically have this for groups of between 6 and 9 students, right? 6 tends to be the minimum. Any less than 6, it's generally a little too light on people, right? It's generally a little too small. The stories don't really build. Any more than 9, it kind of gets crazy and it kind of gets boring after that. So the sweet spot is between 6 and 9 students, and everybody starts with a paper and a pen. This may seem obvious to you, but you know, it's not always so obvious to students. And I generally give them 2 minutes to start the story or to write their part of the story, right? 2 minutes on average. And we'll talk more about that later. Here's one of the tips that I have started this year, and it's really fun to read these stories. And I give everybody the same beginning. And the beginning that I chose to use is every story has to start with the word yesterday. Yesterday. And I do this for 2 reasons. One, because it gets them to work with the past tense, and it's often difficult to start and create a story from nothing, right? The first student will always just sit there and say, you know, I don't know what to write. Well, now you're giving them a beginning, right? Even though it's one word, it helps a lot. I found that it helps incredibly, and it will help them spark an idea. It will help. And the second one, if everybody starts the same way, everyone has the same starting point, and after you read them, as you read these stories, you'll see the different directions that every story goes. It's really fascinating to read. If you don't read your students' writing normally, then well, for one, you should, so shame on you. But 2, these will be very interesting to read. I've read some very crazy and interesting stories. But let me get into some tips and advice and suggestions based on my experience of doing these. These are just some tricks of the trade that I found after years and years of doing this activity, right? Number 1, pre-teach what you want them to focus on. Right? In the past, I've just given them a paper and had them start, right? But now I have them start with the word yesterday, and I pre-teach some things that I would like them to focus on. For example, remind them to use the past tense. That's usually something that students have some difficulty with. And if you'd like to go over the basic structure of a story, even if it's incredibly basic, like every story needs a beginning, a middle, and an end. Something like that. Just a reminder. You're just giving them reminders at this point. And then if you want, I don't like to play around too much with the content of their story because I want to see their imagination. But if you want, if you have certain vocabulary you'd like them to use, then pre-teach that or remind them of these vocabulary, right? These are some tips on pre-teaching. Also, a big advice, if you have a projector screen, if you use the whiteboard, anything, find a countdown clock and put that up on the screen. That just gives them a sense of urgency and it lets them realize that, you know, time is ticking. Also, give the later writers a bit more time because they're going to have to read what the other students wrote, right? So generally, I like to start the first and second people. I give 90 seconds, maybe 2 minutes. And then maybe the third and fourth person, I give 2 minutes or 2 minutes and 30 seconds. And then by the fifth or sixth person, it's 2 minutes, 30 seconds or 3 minutes. These are flexible based on you and your lessons, right? And your students. You should know your students and you should know how your students are getting along. So it depends on you. These are all flexible depending on your class and depending on your students. So this is just an idea. Maybe you've done something like this in the past. It's not an original idea from me, but I have put some little touches on there to make it more fun and more creative and just make it a better experience for me and for the students. One bit of bonus advice, I teach Spanish students. They can be difficult to teach sometimes, but if I give them the freedom, I generally have found that the first or second round, they kind of don't get it. They don't want to do it. They don't like it. But then by the end, by the fourth, fifth, sixth round, they're really into it and they kind of don't want to stop. And that's always a good lesson when they don't want to stop. So let me know in the comments below if you've done this before, any other tricks that you have for a lesson like this. And again, if you like this idea and you want more ideas like this, click subscribe and the bell and they'll come right to you. Thanks for watching. Keep teaching, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.